The backyard of my childhood home buzzed with activity as family members scurried around, hanging streamers and arranging tables for Dad's 60th surprise birthday party. I stood near the garden, watching my relatives transform the space into something elegant enough for the man who'd worked double shifts for 30 years to give us everything we needed. "Victoria, could you help me move this table?" my Aunt Linda called out, gesturing toward a heavy folding table loaded with decorations. "Of course," I replied, setting down my phone and hurrying over. As we repositioned the table, I caught snippets of conversation from my cousins discussing their careers. Mark had just gotten promoted to regional manager at his insurance company. Jessica was celebrating her first year as a junior partner at her law firm, and even my youngest cousin Tyler was bragging about his internship at a tech startup. "Where should we put the gift table?" asked my sister-in-law Amanda, carrying an armload of wrapped presents. "Over by the back door," Mom called from the kitchen window. "That way everyone can see them when they arrive." I glanced at the growing pile of gifts, expensive-looking boxes and bags from high-end stores. My own gift, a modest wrapped box containing a watch I'd carefully saved for, suddenly looked pitiful in comparison. "Victoria, honey, could you run to the store and grab some ice?" Mom appeared at the back door, wiping her hands on her apron. "We're running low and guests will start arriving in an hour." "Sure, Mom." I grabbed my keys from the patio table, grateful for an excuse to escape the mounting pressure I felt watching everyone else's obvious success. As I headed toward my 7-year-old Toyota Camry, I heard my brother Marcus's voice drifting from the kitchen window where he was helping Mom with the food preparation. "I still can't believe Victoria's unemployed again," he said, his voice carrying that particular mix of disappointment and superiority that had become his trademark when discussing me. "What is this, the 4th job she's lost this year?" "It's not that she's lost jobs," Mom replied, her voice laden with maternal concern. "She keeps quitting them. Says they're not the right fit, or not challenging enough. At 29, she needs to learn that work isn't supposed to be fun. It's supposed to pay the bills." I paused by my car, keys in hand, listening to my family discuss my apparent failure to launch. "Remember when she quit that perfectly good administrative position at Johnson & Associates?" Marcus continued. "60,000 a year with benefits, and she walked away because she said the work was mindless data entry. And before that, the marketing coordinator job at Henderson Group," Amanda added, joining the conversation. "I still don't understand why she left that one. It was entry-level, sure, but everyone has to start somewhere." I opened my car door, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. They weren't wrong about the facts. I had quit 4 jobs in the past year. What they didn't understand was why. The drive to the grocery store gave me 20 minutes to compose myself. As I loaded bags of ice into my car, my phone buzzed with a text from my executive assistant, Sarah. "Ms. Williams, the Forbes photographer wants to confirm tomorrow's shoot timing. Also, the board is requesting a brief call before the weekend. Should I schedule it for tonight?" I quickly typed back, "Schedule the call for 9 p.m. and confirm the photo shoot for 10 a.m. sharp. Make sure they have the updated bio information." "Already handled. Congratulations again on the cover story. The whole team is incredibly proud." I smiled, sliding my phone back into my pocket. If only my family knew what I was really building while they assumed I was drifting aimlessly through life. When I returned to the house, the backyard had been transformed. White lights twinkled in the trees, tables were elegantly set with Mom's good china, and the gift table groaned under the weight of presents. Extended family members were arriving, filling the space with laughter and conversation. "Victoria." My Uncle James approached with a concerned expression. "Your mother tells me you're between jobs again. You know, my company is always looking for reliable people. It's warehouse work, but it's steady income with good benefits." "Thanks, Uncle James. I'll keep that in mind. The thing is," he continued, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "at your age you really need to think about stability. Job hopping looks bad on a resume. Employers want to see commitment." I nodded politely, accepting his well-meaning advice while internally calculating that my company's quarterly revenue exceeded his warehouse's annual profits by about 300%. More family members approached throughout the afternoon, each offering similar guidance about my career trajectory. My cousin Rachel suggested I consider going back to school for a practical degree. My Aunt Susan mentioned that her neighbor was hiring for a receptionist position. Even my grandmother pulled me aside to recommend that I Find a nice stable job at the post office like your grandfather had. By the time Dad arrived for his surprise party, I'd received career advice from approximately 15 relatives, none of whom had asked what I actually wanted to do with my life. Surprise! The crowd shouted as Dad walked into the backyard. His face lit up with genuine joy as he took in the decorations, the gathered family, and the obvious effort everyone had put into celebrating him. "This is incredible," he said, his eyes misty as he hugged Mom. "I can't believe you all did this." The evening progressed beautifully. Dad opened gifts with enthusiasm, expressing genuine gratitude for everything from golf accessories to a new grill. When he reached my modest gift, I held my breath. "A watch," he said, examining the simple but elegant timepiece I'd chosen. "Victoria, this is perfect. I've needed a new watch for years." "I'm glad you like it, Dad." Marcus appeared at my shoulder, wine glass in hand and clearly feeling expansive after several drinks. "Dad, you're being too nice. We all know Victoria probably got that at Walmart." The comment drew chuckles from nearby relatives. I felt my face flush, but Dad frowned at Marcus. "It's a thoughtful gift," Dad said firmly. "I'll treasure it." "Of course you will," Marcus continued, apparently oblivious to Dad's disapproval. "But seriously, Victoria, when are you going to get your act together? You can't just keep bouncing from job to job forever." "Marcus," Mom warned, but he was on a roll now. "No, I'm serious. She can't even keep a job for more than 6 months. What employer is going to take a chance on someone with that kind of record?" The conversation around us had quieted, with relatives pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. "At 29, most people have established careers," Marcus continued, his voice getting louder as the wine took effect. "They have 401ks, health insurance, maybe a house. Victoria's still living like she's fresh out of college." I could feel 20 pairs of eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd respond to this public humiliation. Part of me wanted to defend myself, to explain that I wasn't drifting aimlessly but building something extraordinary. But another part of me was curious to see how far Marcus would go. "She can't even keep a job," he declared with finality, raising his wine glass as if toasting his own insight. "That's the bottom line." Everyone laughed except Dad, who looked increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. That's when I heard the click of heels on the back patio. "Excuse me," a familiar voice called out. "I'm looking for Ms. Williams." I turned to see Sarah, my executive assistant, walking across the backyard in her professional attire. A sharp blazer, perfectly pressed slacks, and the kind of confidence that came from working at the highest levels of corporate America. The entire party fell silent as this polished, professional woman approached our casual family gathering. "Sarah," I said, standing up from my lawn chair. "I wasn't expecting you." "I apologize for interrupting," Sarah said with her usual professional demeanor. "But the board meeting moved up to tonight, and there are several urgent items that require your immediate attention." She handed me a leather portfolio and a tablet displaying what looked like financial reports. Marcus stared at Sarah with obvious confusion. "Excuse me, who are you?" "I'm Ms. Williams' executive assistant," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "Sarah Chin, Williams Enterprises." "Executive assistant?" Marcus repeated slowly as if the words didn't make sense. "Sir." "Ms. Williams, the board members are assembled and ready when you are. Also, the Forbes photographer confirmed tomorrow's cover shoot for 10 a.m., and the journalist wants to discuss the profile interview timing." My family was staring at us as if we were speaking a foreign language. I could see the confusion spreading across their faces as they tried to process what they were hearing. "Forbes?" Dad asked quietly. Sarah smiled and reached into her portfolio, pulling out an advance copy of Forbes magazine. "Sir." "Ms. Williams is featured on next month's cover. Tech innovator under 30, how Victoria Williams built a $50 million empire." She handed the magazine to Dad, whose hands trembled slightly as he took it. On the cover was a professional photo of me in an elegant business suit, standing in what was clearly a corporate boardroom with the headline "The Disruptor" in bold letters beneath my image. The backyard was so quiet I could hear the neighbor's sprinkler system cycling on. Dad stared at the magazine cover, then looked up at me, then back at the magazine. "Victoria, what is this?" "It's my company, Dad. Williams Enterprises. We develop artificial intelligence solutions for healthcare systems." Marcus's wine glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the patio. Your company? Yes. I founded it 3 years ago when I left my last traditional job. The one at Henderson Group that everyone thought I was crazy to quit. Sarah consulted her tablet. Ms. Williams, should I brief them on the quarterly numbers? Revenue exceeded projections by 23%, and the new hospital systems contracts have increased our client base to 847 healthcare facilities across North America. Sarah, that's probably enough detail for now, I said gently. But she was already reaching back into her portfolio. I also brought the expansion plans you requested review for. The European market entry strategy shows projected revenue of $200 million over the next 3 years. Uncle James, who'd offered me warehouse work just hours earlier, was staring at the Forbes magazine as Dad passed it around the table. Victoria, is this real? It's real, I confirmed. Williams Enterprises employs 127 people across 4 offices. We're revolutionizing how hospitals manage patient data and treatment protocols using advanced AI algorithms. Marcus found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. But you quit all those jobs. You kept saying they weren't right for you. Because they weren't, I explained. I wasn't job hopping because I couldn't keep work. I was learning everything I could about different industries, different business models, different management styles. Every job I quit taught me something I needed to build my own company. Mom sat heavily in her chair, her hand over her heart. Victoria, why didn't you tell us? I tried, I said gently. Remember when I quit Johnson & Associates and told you I was starting my own business? You said I was being irresponsible and needed to get serious about my career. The memory hit Mom visibly. But you said you were doing computer consulting. You made it sound like you were freelancing. I was at first. That's how most tech companies start. One person with an idea working from their laptop. But the AI applications I developed for healthcare data management attracted attention from major hospital systems. Within 18 months, I had more clients than I could handle alone. Sarah checked her watch. Ms. Williams, the board is waiting. Should I tell them you'll join in 15 minutes? I looked around at my family's shocked faces. 29 years old, and they were seeing me clearly for the first time. Actually, Sarah, could you reschedule for tomorrow morning? Tonight is about celebrating my father. Of course. I'll send the updated meeting invitation now. Sarah closed her portfolio and smiled at Dad. Happy birthday, Mr. Williams. Your daughter speaks of you often. She credits your work ethic and integrity as the foundation of her own success. As Sarah walked back toward the house, the silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Dad spoke. Victoria, honey, I don't understand. If you own a company worth $50 million, why didn't you tell us? I sat back down next to him, taking his hands in mine. Because I wanted to know if you'd support me even when you thought I was failing. I wanted to know if you'd love me even when you thought I couldn't keep a job. Dad's eyes filled with tears. Of course we love you. But sweetheart, we've been so worried. We thought you were struggling. I know. And watching you worry, listening to everyone's advice about finding stability, it taught me something important about who I really am and what I really want. Marcus finally found his voice. Victoria, I'm so sorry. The things I said tonight were based on the information you had, I finished. You saw me quit jobs and assumed I was failing. You didn't consider that maybe I was preparing for something bigger. Cousin Rachel leaned forward. So when you quit that marketing job to pursue your passion, I was leaving to focus on Williams Enterprises full-time. We just landed our first major hospital contract, and I needed to hire our first employees. Uncle James shook his head slowly. And when I offered you warehouse work, my company's annual revenue is currently running at about $47 million, I said gently. But I appreciated the offer. Family looking out for family. Dad was still staring at the Forbes cover. Tech innovator under 30. My little girl. Your little girl who learned everything about business, determination, and integrity from watching you work 2 jobs to support our family, I said. Every algorithm I write, every client meeting I take, every employee I hire, I think about the example you set. Mom wiped tears from her eyes. Victoria, can you forgive us for not understanding? There's nothing to forgive. You wanted what was best for me. You just couldn't see that I was already building it. The evening transformed from that moment forward. Instead of career advice, My relatives asked thoughtful questions about artificial intelligence, healthcare technology, and entrepreneurship. Instead of concern about my stability, they expressed genuine pride in what I'd accomplished. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Dad pulled me aside. "Victoria, I owe you an apology. Not for caring about your future. That's what parents do. But for not trusting that you knew what was right for your life. Dad, you don't owe me anything. Your support meant everything even when you thought I was making mistakes." He hugged me tightly. $50 million, he whispered. "My daughter built a $50 million company." "Actually," I said, smiling against his shoulder, "the Forbes article is based on last quarter's valuation. Our current projections put us closer to $62 million. Dad pulled back to look at me, his eyes wide. $62 million? The healthcare AI market is exploding. Williams Enterprises is positioned to be one of the major players in the industry." He shook his head in amazement. "And to think this morning I was worried about you finding a job with benefits." I laughed. "Well, the benefits package at Williams Enterprises is pretty comprehensive. Full health coverage, generous vacation time, profit sharing, and the company covers continuing education for all employees." "Of course it does," Dad said, pride evident in his voice. "Because you remember what it was like when we couldn't afford those things." As I drove home that night, to the downtown loft I owned outright, not the struggling apartment my family had imagined, I reflected on the evening's revelations. For 3 years I'd let my family believe I was directionless and unstable. Tonight they'd learn the truth. But more importantly, I'd learned something too. Their love and support hadn't been conditional on my success. It had been constant even when they thought I was failing. That knowledge would stay with me as Williams Enterprises continued to grow, as I hired more employees, as I expanded into new markets. Success wasn't just about building a company or making money. It was about staying connected to the people who mattered, even when they didn't understand your journey. Tomorrow I'd sit for a Forbes cover shoot. Next week I'd present our expansion plans to the board. Next month I'd be featured as one of the top innovators in healthcare technology. But tonight had been about something more valuable than any of that. It had been about family finally seeing each other clearly.